For years, I took the insults with a smile, then I walked away from her spotlight. Ethan Whitfield used to believe that love was something you earned by staying quiet. He believed that if he just kept absorbing the small cuts, the sharp comments disguised as jokes, the eye rolls across dinner tables, that eventually his wife would look at him the way she used to, back when they were 24 and broke and hopelessly in love, in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Ohio. He believed patience was a kind of devotion. He was wrong, but it took him 11 years to understand that, and it took one single night, the biggest night of Rachel's life, for him to finally act on what he had known in his bones for a long time. They met in college, in a shared statistics class neither of them cared about. Rachel Bennett was loud in a room, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a party and rearrange the air in it. Ethan was the opposite, steady, funny in a quiet way, the kind of man people forgot to notice until they needed someone to actually show up for them. Somehow they fit. Rachel liked that Ethan never competed with her for attention. Ethan liked that Rachel made him feel like life could be an adventure instead of a checklist. They got married in a backyard with string lights and a borrowed sound system, and for the first few years, it was good. It was really good. The shift happened slowly, the way water erodes stone, so slowly you don't notice until the shape of everything has changed. Rachel started climbing in her career, first as a marketing coordinator, then a manager, then a director at a firm that specialized in luxury real estate branding. She was talented, nobody could deny that. But somewhere along the way, her success became the measuring stick for everything, including Ethan, who worked as a high school shop teacher, a job he loved, a job that paid enough, but not extravagantly. At first, the comments were small. "It's cute that you're happy with just enough," she'd say at dinner parties, laughing lightly, like it was affectionate. Ethan would smile along, because that's what he did. He smiled, he absorbed. He told himself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Over the years, the comments sharpened. At his sister's wedding, when someone asked what Ethan did for a living, Rachel answered for him before he could open his mouth. "He teaches teenagers how to use a table saw. Someone's got to do it." The table laughed. Ethan laughed too, because the alternative was making a scene. And Ethan had never been a man who made scenes. He started noticing a pattern. Whenever Rachel felt insecure, usually after a client rejected a pitch or a colleague got a promotion she wanted, she would find some small way to remind everyone, including herself, that she had traded up less than she deserved, that she had a husband who fixed dishwashers and coached the junior varsity wrestling team, while she flew to Chicago and Dallas for deals worth millions. She never said it outright. She was too smart for that. But it lived in the tone, in the pauses, in the way she'd introduce him at events. "This is Ethan, my husband. He's a teacher," delivered with the same energy someone might use to say, "He's between things right now." Ethan told himself, for years, that this was the cost of loving someone ambitious. He told himself that underneath it, she still loved him, that this was just her nervous system, not her heart. He told himself a lot of things, mostly because the alternative, the idea that his wife had simply stopped respecting him, was too heavy to hold. So instead, he held his tongue. He held it at Thanksgiving, when she joked that he was living the simple life in front of her entire extended family. He held it when she corrected him in public about things he actually knew more about than she did. He held it the night she came home from a work trip and told him, almost as an afterthought, that a client had assumed she was single because, no offense, but you don't exactly scream success. He held it, and held it, and held it, until the holding became its own kind of exhaustion, a low hum underneath every interaction, something he carried into the classroom and out again, something that made him quieter at home, more careful, more folded in on himself. His students noticed he'd become more patient with them, gentler, the way people sometimes get when they've learned, painfully, what it feels like to be dismissed. Then came the gala. Rachel had spent 8 months developing a rebranding campaign for a luxury housing developer, the kind of project that could make her name in the industry. The company was throwing a black tie gala to unveil it publicly, an event with press coverage, industry leaders. The kind of night Rachel had been dreaming about since business school. She had talked about it for months. Ethan had helped her rehearse her speech in the kitchen, more times than he could count, standing at the stove with a dish towel over his shoulder, feeding her lines while dinner simmered. Whatever was cracked between them, he had never stopped wanting good things for her. That part of him, the part that loved her, hadn't died. It had just gotten quieter. The night of the gala, Ethan wore the navy suit Rachel had picked out for him 2 years earlier, the one she said made him look almost polished. He drove them both to the downtown hotel where the event was held, valet parked the car, and walked in beside his wife, who looked stunning in emerald green, practically glowing with anticipation. For a moment, watching her walk into that ballroom under the chandeliers, Ethan felt something soften in his chest. He was proud of her. He had always been proud of her, even when it cost him something to be. They were seated at a table near the front with several of Rachel's colleagues and 2 executives from the client company. The wine was poured, the appetizers arrived, and the conversation started the way these conversations always start: polite, professional, circling around achievements and industry gossip. Then one of the executives, a silver-haired man named Robert Callahan, turned to Ethan and asked, in a friendly enough way, what he did for work. "I teach high school," Ethan said. "Shop class, mostly. Woodworking, small engine repair, that kind of thing." Robert nodded, seemingly interested, and asked a follow-up question about the program. Before Ethan could answer, Rachel cut in, laughing lightly, the same practiced laugh she always used before she said something designed to land like a joke, but cut like a blade. "He teaches kids how to use power tools," she said, swirling her wine. "Meanwhile, I'm out here building an actual career. It's a good thing one of us has ambition, right?" The table laughed, the polite, uncomfortable laugh that comes when people sense tension, but don't know its shape. Ethan felt the familiar heat rise in his neck, the same heat he'd felt at his sister's wedding, at Thanksgiving, 100 other times. He almost let it pass, the way he always did. He almost smiled and changed the subject and swallowed it down with another sip of wine. But something in him, some quiet accumulation of 11 years, refused to move this time. He set his glass down, calmly, and looked at Rachel, not with anger, but with the kind of tired clarity that surprised even him. "Rachel," he said, his voice even, "I've watched you build this career, and I mean that. I'm proud of you, but I've spent over a decade being the punchline whenever you feel unsure of yourself. Tonight is your night. I'm not going to spend it being the joke again." The table went quiet. Rachel's face flushed, caught between embarrassment and defensiveness, and for a second Ethan thought she might apologize, might reach for his hand under the table like she used to when they were young and still knew how to fix things quickly. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and said, too brightly, "Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive," and turned back to Robert as if the moment hadn't happened at all. That was the answer, really. Not the joke itself, but what came after it. The refusal to see him in now, in here. Ethan didn't cause a scene. He didn't raise his voice, or knock over a glass, or storm out dramatically. While heads turned, he simply folded his napkin, set it beside his plate, and stood. "I'm proud of everything you've built," he said quietly. Just to her, "but I can't keep shrinking myself so you can feel bigger. I hope tonight is everything you wanted. I mean that." Then he turned, thanked the table for the evening, and walked out of the ballroom, past the chandeliers and the photographers, and the step and repeat banner with the client's new logo blown up 20 feet tall, out into the cool night air, where he stood for a long moment, just breathing, feeling something unclench in his chest for the first time in years. He didn't take the car. He called a cab, went home, and sat on the porch steps of the house they'd bought together 9 years earlier, looking up at a sky full of more stars than he remembered noticing in a long time. He wasn't angry, not really. He was something closer to relieved. The way you feel after finally putting down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you forgot it had a weight at all. Rachel came home near midnight. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway of the living room where Ethan sat with a mug of tea gone cold in his hands. Her makeup was slightly smudged, whether from crying or the late hour, he couldn't tell. "You embarrassed me," she said finally, though there was less certainty in it than there would have been a few hours earlier. "No," Ethan said gently. "You've been embarrassing me for years, Rachel. Tonight, I just stopped pretending it didn't hurt." She sat down slowly across from him, and for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they actually talked, really talked, about the years of small cuts, the jokes that weren't jokes, the way ambition had curdled into something that needed someone smaller, standing next to it to feel secure. Rachel cried, not performatively, but the quiet, exhausted crying of someone confronting a version of themselves they didn't like. She admitted, haltingly, that her own father had mocked her mother's modest job for years, that she'd promised herself she'd never end up in a marriage like that, and instead had somehow become the one holding the whip. There was no instant fix. Ethan didn't pretend there was. He told her, honestly, that he needed to see change, not apologies, not one good conversation, but a real and lasting shift in how she treated him, in private, and especially in public. He told her he loved her still, underneath all of it, but that love wasn't going to be enough this time if it kept asking him to disappear. In the months that followed, they went to therapy together, something Rachel had always dismissed before as unnecessary. It was slow, uneven work. There were setbacks, moments where old habits crept back in, comments Rachel caught herself making and had to walk back, awkwardly, in front of others. But there were also new things. Rachel introducing Ethan at a company retreat as the person who keeps me honest, meaning it this time. Rachel showing up to his classroom unannounced one afternoon just to watch him teach, staying in the back of the room as sophomores learned to sand a chair leg, and crying quietly at how patient and alive he was in that space. A version of him she realized she hadn't really seen in years. A year after the gala, they stood again in a different ballroom, this time for their 10th wedding anniversary, a small gathering of close friends and family, rather than industry executives and press. Rachel gave a toast, her voice steady, and told the room that the best decision she ever made wasn't the rebranding campaign that made her career, but staying with the man who finally forced her to see who she'd become, and who loved her enough to walk away from the version of their marriage that was killing something quiet and important between them. Ethan didn't need the toast to know things had changed. He knew it in smaller ways. The way she asked about his students, now really asked. The way she stopped flinching around the word teacher like it was something to apologize for. He knew it in the way she reached for his hand at dinner parties, instead of using him as material for a joke. Some people might say Ethan should have left that night at the gala and never looked back, that 11 years of small humiliations don't deserve a second chance. Maybe they're right. But Ethan had learned something that night that he carried with him long after. That walking away doesn't always mean walking out of a life. Sometimes it means walking out of a role you never should have accepted in the first place, and giving the people who love you the choice to meet you as an equal or lose you entirely. Rachel chose to meet him, and Ethan, for the first time in over a decade, finally felt like he wasn't just being tolerated in his own marriage. He felt seen, and in the end, that was worth more than any promotion, any spotlight, any night that used to be someone else's alone to shine in.